America has towns that aren't just hard to live in. They feel like places that slowly punish the people who stay. In this video, we're diving into the side of America people rarely talk about. Small towns trapped in poverty, extreme isolation, crime, disasters, and total collapse. From desert towns barely hanging on to places abandoned because of toxic land and underground fires, every one of these stories is real. And we're starting with one of the most ironic town names in America. The name sounds like a joke, but living here often feels like the consequence itself. This small town in southern New Mexico is home to around 6,000 people, and its economy is barely moving. Median household income sits at just $29,000 a year, less than half the U.S. national average. Even worse, about 34 to 35% of the population lives below the poverty line. Jobs are mostly in low-wage services, hot spring tourism, and part-time gigs. Young people tend to leave, leaving behind an aging population and a town growing quieter every year. Summers hit extreme highs, above 104 degrees Fahrenheit, while access to healthcare and entertainment is limited. The town once drew attention from Hollywood, a 1997 film, Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, and a 2020 documentary used its name. Ironically, the fame never changed the town's actual fate. Niobrara is a town that is slowly disappearing. Located in northeastern Nebraska, it has a population of around 360 people and often feels more like a large retirement village than a functioning community. The median age is close to 55, which is a clear sign that younger generations do not tend to stay. On paper, Niobrara is not a crime hotspot. Median household income is around $38,000 a year, which is still well below the national average. Poverty rates hover near 10%, and while that might seem manageable at first glance, it can be misleading. The central problem is not extreme poverty, but a lack of opportunity. Jobs are concentrated in local services, small-scale farming, and public sector roles. The population remains stagnant, businesses are limited, and after sundown, the town becomes nearly silent. After quiet, aging towns like Niobrara, Eagle Pass faces a more constant kind of pressure that rarely eases. This border town in southern Texas has around 28,000 residents and sits directly across the Rio Grande from Mexico. Economically, it remains well behind national standards. Median household income falls in the mid-$40,000 range, while about 1 in 4 residents live below the poverty line. Most jobs are in retail, service work, and other low-wage sectors. People work hard in Eagle Pass, but upward mobility often feels out of reach. The pressure that comes with being a border town, including smuggling, migrant detention, and federal enforcement, creates a non-stop and draining atmosphere. While some crime statistics vary, the general feeling of insecurity remains strong. Eagle Pass often appears in national news coverage, not for signs of progress, but because of recurring border crises. If Eagle Pass feels weighed down by poverty, Winnemucca represents a different kind of worst small town, one that works hard but never truly feels stable. Located in northern Nevada, this desert town of about 8,000 people sits in a dry, isolated landscape far from any major city. On the surface, Winnemucca appears more active than many places like it, largely because of gold mining and truck traffic along Interstate 80. But its economy is known for a boom and bust cycle. When mining is strong, money moves through town, and when it slows, the town declines with it. Although average incomes appear higher than in many other small towns, the cost of living, long working hours, and dependence on a single industry make daily life fragile. Crime, especially drug-related cases and domestic violence, is a real concern. Winnemucca is often described as a stopover, not a destination, which captures a deeper issue. It is a place people pass through rather than settle in, and for many residents, that instability is the core problem. If Winnemucca struggles with economic swings, Williston shows that high incomes do not always translate into a better quality of life. This small town in western North Dakota, with about 27,000 residents, was once the center of the Bakken Shale oil boom. On paper, Williston appears successful. The median household income is around $84,000, which is well above the U.S. average. The reality, however, is more complex. The oil boom drove rent and housing prices sharply upward, which often canceled out the benefit of higher wages. Infrastructure was unable to keep pace, public services fell behind, and crime, especially drug use, violence, and social disorder, increased during the boom years. Even though the industry has slowed, the effects of that period are still visible. Williston was once described as one of the most chaotic boom towns in America, and some of those scars remain. Tonopah faces a quieter problem: total isolation. This desert town in central Nevada has about 2,400 residents and sits between Reno and Las Vegas, both more than 3 hours away. There is no major city nearby, and daily life reflects that distance in practical ways. Economically, Tonopah remains fragile. Median household income is around $45,000 to $50,000. And about 17% of residents live in poverty, which is higher than the national average. Jobs are concentrated in local government, small-scale mining, and basic services. Entertainment options are minimal, healthcare access is limited, and the climate is harsh, with scorching summers and freezing winters. Tonopah is known as one of Nevada's most haunted towns, and that reputation closely matches its atmosphere: quiet, aging, and frozen in time. Meanwhile, Lake Charles continues to cycle through disaster and recovery. Once known as the festival capital of Louisiana, it is now more often associated with ongoing cleanup efforts. This city in southwest Louisiana has about 75,000 residents, and its economy is tied to petrochemical plants and a regional port. On paper, conditions appear relatively stable, with median household income around $55,000. Even so, about 18% to 20% of residents still live in poverty. The biggest challenge is nature itself. In a short period, Lake Charles was hit by Hurricanes Laura and Delta in 2020, followed by additional storms that further damaged infrastructure and weakened community morale. Thousands of homes were damaged, insurance rates rose sharply, and many families have still not fully recovered. When that is combined with the smell of heavy industry, ongoing environmental risks, and extreme weather, Lake Charles can feel caught between rebuilding and breaking down. If Lake Charles lives under the threat of hurricanes, Clearlake presents a much more visible set of problems. Clearlake itself is contaminated by natural mercury linked to old mining and volcanic activity. The town of Clearlake, located along its shores, has about 15,000 residents. The scenery is attractive, but the town's reputation is far more troubling. For years, Clearlake has ranked well above the California average for both violent and property crime, and it has repeatedly appeared on lists of the state's most dangerous small towns. Economically, the city is unstable. Median household income is around $40,000, while roughly 25% to 30% of residents live below the poverty line. Drug problems and crime reinforce each other, creating a cycle that is difficult to break. Abandoned buildings, aging motels, and entire neighborhoods give the impression of a place that stopped developing decades ago. King Cove is not defined by poverty or high crime, but daily life there is shaped by constant pressure from nature, distance, and severe limitations. This small town on the edge of the Alaska Peninsula has about 800 residents and is isolated by frigid waters and often brutal weather conditions. There is no road connecting King Cove to any major city. Residents depend on small planes or boats, which are often grounded or delayed by storms and heavy fog. Economically, King Cove depends on fishing, especially seasonal seafood processing. Median income is relatively high for a town of its size, but that figure can be misleading. The cost of living is extremely high, groceries are expensive, and job opportunities are very limited outside the fishing economy. The most serious issue is access to medical care. The nearest full hospital is hours away, and in an emergency, those delays can become life-threatening. If King Cove is shaped by weather-related isolation, Hildale stands out because of its social environment. This small town on the Utah-Arizona border has a population of around 3,000, and for decades it was known as the headquarters of the FLDS, the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, a closed religious sect once led by Warren Jeffs, who is now serving life in prison. The effects of that history are still present. Hildale has a long record of strict social control, illegal polygamy, and restrictions on education and personal freedom, particularly for women and children. Economically, median household income is around $45,000, and poverty levels remain higher than Utah's average, despite Utah generally being seen as a prosperous state. In recent years, local efforts have aimed to normalize the town and attract new residents, but social tensions continue. Hildale and its twin city, Colorado City, were once widely described by national media as the polygamous twin towns. Bethel places more strain on social and mental endurance. This town of about 6,300 residents is the regional hub of the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, serving dozens of remote villages, yet it still has no road access to any major city. Nearly everything arrives by plane or river, which makes life expensive from the beginning. On paper, median household income is around $55,000, but that number does not reflect the full reality. About 25% of residents live below the poverty line, and the costs of food, fuel, and housing are among the highest in the United States. Many surrounding areas have alcohol bans, but bootlegging, drug use, and violence remain serious problems. Extreme weather, long dark seasons, and limited entertainment options add to the psychological strain of living there. Bethel is often described as the unofficial capital of Western Alaska, a place many people come to in order to get by, rather than to build a more comfortable life. On paper, Pahrump appears relatively stable. This desert town has around 45,000 residents and is often promoted as a cheaper alternative to Las Vegas. But for people living there, the underlying problems become more visible over time. Pahrump is a town growing quickly without a clear direction or a strong economic base to support that growth. Median household income is around $48,000, while the poverty rate remains near 20%, which is high for a place where living costs continue to rise. Most jobs are concentrated in low-wage service work, small casinos, and temporary gigs, which makes long-term financial stability difficult to maintain. Summers are severe, with temperatures regularly exceeding 110 degrees Fahrenheit, which further reduces quality of life. Pahrump is also known for its legal brothels, which attract tourism but do not provide a meaningful long-term economic solution. The town is often described as a place for people trying to escape, yet many who move there find themselves stuck without real opportunity. Utqiaġvik, the northernmost city in the United States, presents a different kind of challenge, one centered on human endurance and mental strain. Formerly known as Barrow, the city officially returned to its Inupiat name in 2016. With a population of around 4,900, it sits on the Arctic Ocean and has no road connection to the outside world. Nearly everything must be flown in, which raises the cost of living across the board, including groceries and fuel. Statistically, the local economy appears paradoxical. Median household income is about $85,000, supported largely by government and energy sector jobs. Even so, around 20% of residents live in poverty, and the wealth gap is noticeable. The most difficult factor is the environment. Utqiaġvik experiences roughly 65 days of total darkness each winter during the polar night. Extreme cold, complete isolation, and long periods without sunlight all contribute to elevated rates of seasonal depression. Gary reflects the collapse of a system that once worked. The hometown of Michael Jackson, Gary was once a major symbol of America's steel industry. Today, after reaching a peak population of 175,000, the city has only about 65,000 residents remaining, with abandoned buildings, closed schools, and empty homes spread throughout the area. Economically, Gary continues to struggle. Median household income sits around $35,000, well below the national average. More than 30% of residents live below the poverty line, and local job opportunities have remained limited since the collapse of the steel industry. Crime, especially violent crime, has consistently ranked among the highest in Indiana, making some parts of the city feel unsafe even during the day. If Gary reflects the collapse of industry, Slab City is often described as the last free place in America, with no taxes, no rules, and no oversight. But Slab City is extreme precisely because there is no functioning system at all. Located in the desert of Imperial County, California, it is not an official town but an off-grid community built on the concrete slabs of a former World War II military base. There is no public electricity, no clean water system, no sanitation infrastructure, and no formal law enforcement. Summers are severe, with temperatures regularly reaching 113 degrees Fahrenheit, and heat stroke deaths are not uncommon. Many residents do not have a permanent address and rely on homemade solar setups and water deliveries. Drug use, mental illness, and violence are common, but they are rarely documented because of the community's unofficial status. Slab City is not only difficult to live in, it is also an extreme example of how total freedom without structure can shift from idealism into danger. If Slab City reflects the consequences of having no system, Jackson shows how a city can fail even while it continues to function as a state capital. Once known as the City with Soul for its deep African-American musical and cultural roots, Jackson has a population of around 150,000, which makes it larger than most places on this list. Even so, in terms of quality of life, many neighborhoods feel less like a capital city and more like a collapsed small town. The city's most widely known issue is its clean water crisis. For years, residents have faced aging pipes, inconsistent water pressure, and repeated boil water notices that return so often they have become routine. Economically, Jackson continues to fall behind. Median household income is around $43,000, well below the national average, and about 25% of residents live in poverty. Job opportunities are limited, the tax base continues to shrink, and the middle class keeps moving to the suburbs. Violent crime rates remain among the highest in Mississippi, which further accelerates the population exodus from the city. East St. Louis shows the harsher effects of long-term structural failure. Located across the Mississippi River, this small city now has only around 18,000 residents, down from more than 80,000 at its mid-20th century peak. That population decline has left behind vacant blocks, weakened public services, and a visible sense of abandonment throughout the city. Economically, the city is in severe distress. Median household income is around $27,000, one of the lowest in Illinois. About 1/3 of the population lives in poverty, and job prospects are extremely limited. East St. Louis has also long been associated with violent crime rates well above the national average, which has created a lasting stigma despite repeated revitalization efforts. The contrast is especially striking because the city was once a major center for jazz and blues. Its cultural legacy, however, was not enough to prevent the economic and social collapse that followed. Picher is a town that has been officially abandoned. Once a small mining community in northeastern Oklahoma, it previously depended on lead and zinc mining. Today, its population is nearly zero after a major federal relocation effort in the late 2000s. The reason was direct and severe. The land, air, and water had become toxic. For decades, mining waste accumulated into enormous chat piles, or mounds of leftover material contaminated with heavy metals. Children in Picher were later found to have dangerously high levels of lead in their blood, which triggered a major public health crisis. In 2009, Picher was officially declared part of the largest Superfund site in the United States, and the town was effectively shut down. In a final and tragic turn, a massive tornado struck in 2008 and destroyed many of the few buildings still standing, as the town was already nearing its end. After Centralia, which burns silently underground, Whittier feels oppressive in a completely different way, not because of fire, but because of isolation and confinement. This coastal town in southern Alaska has a population of about 300 people, and what makes it unusual is that nearly all residents live in the same building, Baggage Towers, a former military structure dating to the World War II era. Inside the building are apartments, the police station, a clinic, a small store, and even a church. In practical terms, life in Whittier is centered around a single concrete tower. The town is connected to the outside world by only one tunnel, about 2.5 miles long, which operates on a fixed schedule and is shared by both cars and trains. When severe weather arrives or when the tunnel is closed, Whittier becomes completely isolated. The local economy depends on seasonal tourism and a small number of government jobs. Employment options are limited, and the cost of living remains high. Whittier is also one of the wettest towns in the United States, with rain or snow falling on more than 200 days each year. Living there is not mainly defined by crime or severe poverty. Instead, the challenge is physical isolation, close quarters, and the slow psychological pressure of being surrounded constantly by the same walls and the same people. If Picher became toxic at the surface, Centralia is dangerous from below the ground. This small town in Pennsylvania is one of the most well-known examples of a place destroyed by a man-made disaster. Since 1962, an underground coal mine fire has been burning beneath Centralia, and it is expected to continue burning for hundreds more years. Toxic smoke seeps through cracks in the ground, roads have buckled and collapsed, and carbon monoxide levels have at times reached lethal concentrations. The U.S. government carried out a large relocation program, and from a population of more than 1,000 residents, only a small handful remain today, refusing to leave. In 2002, the USPS officially revoked Centralia's zip code. The town is also often cited as a visual inspiration for the horror film Silent Hill, though it was not officially adapted from Centralia. Today, Centralia remains a place defined by fog, silence, and danger, and it stands as a stark reminder of what can happen when a fire begins underground and cannot be extinguished.